Hey guys, kinggath here with Bethesda Mod School. In this lesson, we're going to go over something super powerful in the creation kit with Fallout 4, and that is material swaps. These let you basically take existing models, apply different materials to them, and effectively create new objects out of it. And I'm going to show you how to do it in terms of level design if you're creating some world spaces or editing vanilla spaces. I'm also going to show you how you can do it with static collections and with workshop objects so that you guys have a wide variety of tools here. I am going to assume you've at least done the Creation Kit 101 Basics tutorial and probably the Static Collection tutorial so that you have a grasp of what I'm doing here. And those are some of the earlier tutorials in the Creation Kit, so go check those out if you're not sure how to do either of those things or if you run into something that you're not understanding what I'm doing there. So the first thing you'll see here is I've loaded into our trusty outhouse cell where we've got this thing planned here ready to go. And I'm going to start by just showing you one of the coolest tools for doing level design with. So I've showed in the past that if you hold down the Alt key while you've got an item selected, you can scroll through with your mouse wheel and find different objects. And it's a great way to quickly scan through different types of objects because it tends to be that Bethesda has all of the like items grouped together so that as you're alt scrolling, the similar items will all pop up. But there's actually another hotkey combination you can do with that to change materials. So if you click on an item and you hold down Alt plus Shift and then roll your mouse wheel, you will change the texture to material swaps that are pre-configured. And I'll explain what a material swap is in a moment, but I'm just going to show you what happens as we do this. So right now you can see this thing changed into some kind of burnt wood. And you can see here under material swap, it's called Ash and Char. If we do it again, and click off, we get another variation of the Ash and Char. One more time, we get kind of this blue pseudo paint, and you can see that's called Shack Wood Tile. It's a blue paint, and you can double click on these, and if you're on the extra tab on the reference, you can see exactly what the material swap is called. You can also just, once you pull this menu open here, you can pull down and select directly some of the material swaps and push OK to get them. And this works perfectly for if you're doing level design work. So that, like, if you do that, you're good to go. It will work in the game and it will show up like that. Now, if you're doing static collections or workshop items, then obviously you have to do something at a different level. So that's where editing the actual forms and creating new forms comes into play. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So for level editing, you can do it as simply as holding down Alt and Shift and scrolling your mouse wheel, and you can find variations of a lot of the items. And toward the end, I will show you how to make entirely new material swaps that you can make use of. But for now, I just wanted to show you that quick thing because that is a very, very powerful tool. And even if you're doing, say, for example, some settlements designs where you're trying to experiment and see what's possible with static collections, using that Alt-Shift thing with the mouse wheel is a great way to find different potentials. And then just before you make the static collection, you'll do this next step. So in order to use these material swaps in a static collection or as part of a workshop item, what you'll want to do is actually create yourself a new base record. So what I like to do is if I've got it already in the cell here, I would hit edit base. Alternatively, you could find it in the object window and duplicate it. Just know that if you decide to do the edit base method, the very first thing you should do is rename this ID field so that you don't actually accidentally overwrite the vanilla form. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just leave the name the same, except I'm going to add my kg test prefix, and we're going to extend it with a suffix green, I guess, because we're going to use the green paint there. Now, this window is all dark here. Usually, if you just click in there and make sure your mouse is focused on, press the letter A, the lights should kick on there so you can actually see all the details. So if you zoom in close, you can see it looks like the original thing. So now we basically want to change the material so it's using that green paint so that we can have an object that does that. So to do that, you click on the Edit button next to Model. And you'll see there's a material swap option here, and you just pull this down and you select that one and you press OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and say yes to this to create a new form because I changed the ID. It's going to let me create a new form out of it. And because I hit edit base here, this is actually going to automatically swap this form with the one that I just created. So now if we double click this, you can see if we edit base again here, that it's actually pointing now to my KG test version. So it's so when you're building static collection models, it's an awesome way to do it. Is just kind of just experiment, figure out what looks good, and then go back and create the forms because it'll auto swap them when you do it from that edit base method. So if you wanted to do a workshop item instead, it would probably be more likely that you're going to come over here, find the item, duplicate it, make the material swap, and then you're good to go. With the static collections, obviously, I already had this thing placed in the cell. And now if I were to create this into a static collection, so if we just go ahead in here and we'll do kg test, outhouse, scall, one green wall, we'll call it. And we'll let that create, and you'll see that the green sticks. Now, if we did that without actually creating that custom thing, so let's roll back. So I'm just going to actually reload the plugin, and we might snip the video here due to how long the creation kit takes. But just to show you what will happen, so you can see whether or not you ran into this issue of if you failed to create a new form with the material swap applied at the model level. What'll basically happen is that all of these pieces that you material swapped by using either the drop down on the extras tab or the Alt+shift scroll method, is that all of them will revert back to their original textures that base model is at. So you basically just need to, if you have that happen, just back up, undo your static collection, which you can do with Alt+shift+U, I want to say, and I'm going to have to double check that. But basically you fragment the static collection and then just change out those particular models that you wanted the material swaps on there, so that you can make sure that those actually get folded in correctly. Okay, so back in here, so if we were to just go do the Alt+shift method and add this in, and then we go ahead and create ourselves a static collection, so kg test, and we'll just call this outhouse scall testing, and push OK here, and you'll see that everything reverted back to the regular texture. So that's what happens if you fail to actually create a different form, one of these different records, with the actual material swap applied on that edit screen of the model. So if you don't create it there, you're going to have your things all revert back. So that's how you get around that. All right, so the next potential thing that you might want to do are set up workshop items to do this. So for that, you're basically going to do the exact same thing we did, except not from within here. So you might go into here, go to edit, pull down and select a different material, but there's often not the materials that you want, or there might not be additional materials available just by the Alt+shift. And so this is another point I'll show you, is that you can actually do what's called custom material swaps, and these allow you to basically swap any material for any other. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to look nice. Occasionally the UV mapping, which is something we'll discuss in some future tutorial, but UV mapping basically means how that flat texture file is aligned to the shape of the model. It might not always work out, but for a lot of material type things, you can do swaps pretty easily. So when you see simple things like this is just a simple flat corrugated metal texture, there's probably a lot of things we can swap that out for. So what you want to do there is you're going to go to custom material swap, and you'll see that this area lights up. So if we have this undone, you'll see it's kind of grayed out. And if we go to custom material swap, you can suddenly change it. And generally the things are pretty self-explanatory of what they're referring to. So shack wood planks is going to be the wood pieces, whereas shack roof metal corrugated is going to be that rusty metal. So let's say we want to just replace that corrugated metal with something else. So what you would do is you would click in the white space under the replacement material column next to the one you want to try and replace. So we'll go ahead and double click that. And you'll get this select a swap material screen. And basically you can navigate through all these different materials and try out different versions. Now, obviously this isn't the best way to preview materials. And the best way to preview all the different textures and everything is actually to extract your entire Fallout 4 directory. If you're going to get seriously into modding, I would highly recommend you do that. And I'll probably cover that in another tutorial. But essentially all you do is take the Archive2 tool and you can extract all of the files that are in Fallout 4 into a loose directory somewhere on your hard drive. It will be massive. You're going to need dozens of gigabytes in order to do this. So you're going to need a lot of hard drive space, but it'll basically allow you to go through them outside of the creation kit or outside of anything else and just kind of get a feel for all the assets. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how you generally do it and where some of the basic things are. So most of the types of materials and things like that, like walls and roofs and pieces of wood, are all going to be found under the architecture category. There's also a large number of them under set dressing, but I know the stuff I'm going to look at is under architecture. So let's say we want to take this corrugated metal here and we want to change it for the one that looks kind of more like the warehouse kit. And so what we'll do is we'll go under architecture warehouse and we'll scroll down here. And watch out for, if you're doing it for workshop items or for static collections, you watch out for ones that say one-sided in the name of them, because that generally means that they will only render on one side. So from the other side, if the player goes around there, it'll be invisible. And obviously we don't want that for workshop type items. So we're going to go ahead and select this warehouse wall Korg yellow. And you'll see it has that more warehouse feel that you've seen probably on, if you're playing some settlements, on some of the industrial plots. Within the game world, you'll have seen this in a lot of like the actual in-game warehouses or factory type buildings, that they'll have this texture instead. So now you can see if we flip this over, it's got it on both sides. The wood stayed the same, and it just swapped that one material. We didn't have to add any new models, and now we've got ourselves an alternative to the shack mid-roof here. So then we could just go ahead and name this. And we'll do warehouse, we'll call it warehouse kit. And then we just go ahead and hit OK. And now we've got ourselves a nice new fancy mid-roof version with the material swap on it. And if we wanted to, we could create a constructible record and make this so that players could build this in workshop mode. And if you want to know how to do that, I've done a tutorial on creating constructible workshop objects, so definitely go check that one out. So that's one way to do it. Now, another way that I would recommend, if you're going to do something like this, so imagine you want to take all of these workshop shack pieces that have these different corrugated metal, and you want to make an alternate version of each of them for the warehouse. Well, then rather than doing a custom swap for each of them, you can actually create those material swaps that appear in this drop-down menu. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. So if you go into an object window, and you scroll down and expand miscellaneous and click down to material swap, you'll find all of these different material swaps. So we're going to go ahead and create our own. So just like any other form we want to create a brand new one of, all you do is right click over in the right hand side once you're selected on the category and press new, and you'll get the new material swap screen. So the first thing we're going to do is type in KG test, and we're going to call this, we're going to name it similar to how Bethesda tends to name things, which is they try and name things after the pieces that are involved in it so that it's very straightforward to see what it's doing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to open this up, and we're going to edit base, and we're going to look at the name of this material file so that we can just use that in there. So the one we're changing out is shack roof metal corrugated. So we'll call it that. So shack roof metal corrugated. You absolutely don't have to do this. And I will also warn you that there is a 99 character limit in this ID field. If you go beyond that, you will end up creating a invalid form ID. Oh, thank you, Alexa. So you can basically, you have a 99 character limit. It takes a while to fill that, but for some of these longer names, you could pull it off pretty easily. So be aware of that. And we're going to be changing that to something else. So I'll finish filling out the ID in a moment here when we do our first material. So one thing that I found out the hard way is that these boxes here are kind of a trap. It looks like you can type in them, but if you actually do that, you can end up creating a faulty material swap that will crash the creation kit. So what you'll want to do to create an actual material swap is you're going to right click in this area down here and press new, and you'll navigate to your first material. So in our case, we want this shack roof metal corrugated. So I believe that that is under architecture and then shack. So let's head in there, shacks, shack roof. And this is another advantage to naming it that, is that I can quickly find it once I'm in this screen. So shack roof metal corrugated. Let's see, we're going to assume that it's alpha two-sided because this is a workshop piece. And then as soon as you double click on that or click it and press OK, it'll immediately offer you to select a replacement material, which is the one you want to change to. So we wanted to do the warehouse yellow type. So we'll go ahead and select that and press OK. And now you'll see in here that we've got on the left, we've got our original material, and on the right, our replacement material. Now, one thing we could do here as well is we could right click in here and add another new one, and we could also replace the shack wood planks, and then anytime our material swap was applied, it would swap both of those textures. But in this case, I just want to do the single swap. So here's the risky part about these right here. So if you look, you can see I could actually type in here. So technically I could, if I wanted to, change to yellow 2 by just typing in the number 2 and pressing OK. But what I've found is that then this material swap will actually be corrupt, and then when you go to reuse it later, you can crash the creation kit. So for whatever reason, even though these are typable, I would avoid ever typing in them and always use these edit buttons if you need to change them. So if I decided, you know what, I want to use yellow 2, I would press edit and come in here and just select it manually as opposed to typing in right there. All right, so now that we've got our texture here, or our material file, we're going to go ahead and copy the first part of that and put it in there so now it matches. It kind of matches the form of Bethesda. I believe they do something like the word 2, which we can do that as well. And then you just press OK. So we've got our material swap created. And then we're going to close out of those. And we'll show that that does show up in the list. So if you double click on this and you go to material swap, and it's okay, of course it's not going to show up immediately. Let's see. It might be that you have to reload the creation kit. I'm trying to refresh to see if it shows up immediately or not. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come back after I've reloaded. All right, so I just rebooted the CK. It didn't come back up in the list, and then I realized I had made a mistake that I think will be very common. So it's actually a great one to make so that you guys can, I can show you how to work around it. So I basically selected the wrong version of shack roof metal in my material swap, and that's a common thing. And what I like to do for these particular types of things where I'm trying to create a new material swap that I can apply to multiple items is when I find that it's easy to make a mistake like that, I will just add additional things to my material swap to cover the other versions. So since there are so many different versions of this, it makes sense to me to have this material swap just handle all of them. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add another new one. And we're going to scroll down to the architecture again and then shack. And so since there are multiple versions of this, so we've got all these different ones, what I would like to do here in this case is just do the swap for each of them. That way, whenever we apply that swap, we won't have to worry specifically about which of these corrugated roof metal versions it is. It'll just work for all of them. So the nice thing about the material swaps is that if you have a material in your swap that isn't present in the current model you're using, it will just skip it. So it's okay to have extra to make sure that you can cover these types of situations. So we'll go ahead and add that one, and then we would assume that I would probably also add all the other ones. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to. I'm just going to add the one that I know I need to. And actually looking at it, I can see I did the wrong one. I did no alpha there. And as we can see here, and by the way, this screen I brought up just by bringing up the model. I opened up the form for that model and clicked edit next to model so that I could see all of the actual material files that it's using. So basically, this is a great way to get around this. So if you're trying to build a kit where you want to make a bunch of swaps, this is definitely the way I would recommend to do it. It just makes it cleaner rather than having to go into each model and manually select the custom material and then navigate to each one, which could take a lot of time, especially if you're doing a bunch of different replacements. If you're doing just one, it's probably a similar amount of time, although you do have to hit custom material swap, then double click here, then navigate through this, and you might forget where it was that you found it, and it's just way easier if you go ahead and set up these actual material swap files, or forms, I should say, is what they would be called. So we will go ahead and select, okay, well, I got to remember we're on base material, and this will always show you the clue of which side of it you're on. So the base material is the material you're swapping from, and the replacement material is the one you're swapping to. So we don't need to find shack roof metal corrugated 01 alpha. So let's find that. And that is this guy right here. And we want to swap it over to our warehouse, and we were using yellow 2. And now we can confirm right here that we've got the corrugated 1 alpha that's going to match up there. And then we'll go ahead and hit OK to save our swap there. And let's find out if it shows up in the list this time, or if I have to reboot once again. Nope, there it goes. It does show up immediately. So that's how you'll know you have done it correctly. It will show up immediately in the list, and you'll be able to select it. We could also have done it with our Alt+shift thing, so you can see now it shows up in that list. And we could do that with the entire kit now. So if we wanted to, for example, if we take, and this is a little trick I've never shown you guys before, but you can actually drag multiple items into the window at once. So if I've got all these selected and I drag them in, it takes a moment, but it will drop all of these in, and then you can just start moving them around. So we could find all the pieces that have the corrugated metal here. So get all the rest of you guys out of here. And you can actually even do this. This is actually another little thing you can do. I don't know when it would be useful. I guess if you were doing level design and you had a whole bunch of these pieces, or I guess even with static collections, if you were building for example, a Sim Settlements building, is you can actually select all of these different references here, and you can do the Alt-Shift thing on all of them at once. So we can quickly swap between, so you can see as I'm scrolling through it, swapping them all, and it swaps all of them over to our new material swap. So that's really useful in level design if you need to change everything over to a different material all at once, like to say you decide that a building you design would look better at a different style, or if you just want to test what it would look like, you can absolutely do that. And again, same thing for those static collections. If you were building something for, say, Sim Settlements, you would just need to then, after the fact, go through and create those alternate versions of each of those to swap them out in your model. But that's material swaps in a nutshell. They're pretty straightforward. They're basically you're taking an existing model and applying a different texture to it. The one thing we didn't cover, and I'll cover in another tutorial, is how you would use completely custom textures. So textures that weren't provided by Bethesda, that maybe you created yourself or you downloaded from the internet somewhere. That will be covered in a different tutorial because it does require you to create actual material files. Those are those BGSM files that we've been navigating to, and that that will definitely be covered in another tutorial. There's a great third-party app I can show you guys how to use to do those. But other than that, guys, enjoy your modding. Go play with material swaps. These should open up a world of new possibilities for you.